the 10 principles in the Psalms 1. Psalms 1 says, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight, that person that's there, is in the law of the Lord. And in his law, God's law, doth he meditate day and night. And he, the person that is walking with the Lord, should be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. Now, the fruit is obviously God's fruit, and it's God's season. And his leaf, this is the tree's leaf, shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. And we talked about that. God tells us what not to do. And we have to fight against sin, because it is a fight. It's not, if we don't fight, it's not going to work. We can't be casual about it. We can't be laid back about it. It doesn't just happen that sin doesn't happen. We have to work against it, because it's our nature to sin. It's our default setting, however you want to look at it. And it doesn't take a lot, but we have to do to stay out of it. And you know, God gives us victory. When he rose from the dead, he had victory over death and sin. And so we no longer have to have sin. I thought of a kind of a new definition. I was talking to the teens yesterday. And one of the things I don't even know that I said to them, but I wrote it down, was that victory, what victory is, the way victory works out in our life that I've figured out is peace. When I have peace, that is victory. Because the fight against sin it's all the uncomfortableness, the confusion, the fear, the worry, all that is the result of sin and is sin. And so when that sin is defeated, when God defeats sin in my life, what's left over? Peace. And that's what we're all looking for. That's how I spell victory, is peace. And then I walk back into it again, and I get all this stuff back. And then I get back where I'm supposed to be, and he gives me back the peace. Renew the joy of my salvation. You know, because that's what I want. That's victory. And we can have that. We just have to let him do it. So verse 3, that's what we're striving for. That's when we're walking with the Lord. Verse 4 says, the ungodly are not so. That's such a sad verse to me. It's like, you know, but if you won't go there, you don't have it. But are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. And I looked at several commentaries, and most of them say that the ungodly are the people that aren't saved. But I'm going to talk to y'all, because we live ungodly sometimes. We have very much ability to be pretty ungodly. And when we do, the ungodly are not so. We don't have that peace. But are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. The ungodly can be Christians who choose not to walk with the Lord, or the lost person that doesn't walk with him. And I get the lost person. They don't have any chance of victory. But us, because this is who we are, and this is what we're talking about. If we're saved and choose not to walk with God, we're out from under his protection. We're out, you know, we're going to be blown around by every wind of change. And the Bible talks about any wind of change in doctrine that comes by. Just, we'll go this way, we'll go this way. We have no foundation. And that's not true. We have a foundation, but we haven't built a house on it, and we get blown off of it. We slip off, we fall. The foundation's still there, but we're rolling around on that foundation in the storm. Okay, and that's up to us. Okay, we'll be like trees that don't have deep roots. We'll be blown over by the first wind that comes through. I was thinking about living out in California when we lived in Chico. Chico, California, among other things, is right in the middle of almond country. It's where they grow most of the almonds that you buy in a commercial setting come from California, specifically in the huge area around Chico. And it's been a major industry there for years and years. And there's my understanding of this, and I don't know a lot about it, just a little bit, so don't pin me down on names and stuff, but there's two major types of almond trees. And one of them has very deep roots, and it's very sturdy, and it grows very slowly, kind of the wild almond trees that just grow, these big, huge trees. And this tree has a large yield of nuts, and the nuts are very good nuts, large, sweet tasting, without any bitterness or anything. And there's another type of tree that has a smaller yield, and it doesn't taste as good, but it grows much more quickly. And so if you're going to plant an almond orchard, you want them as soon as you can. You don't want to wait, 20 years to have your first almonds. That just, it's not practical, although it's great. If you can afford to take the time to have, wait that long, it's great. So what the almond growers did out here, and we used to know the guy, Richard Price. He was I just lost his name, the ag commissioner, I think, for the county ag commissioner. Who is it that signs all the gas pumps? Yeah, that's him. Out here, you look on the gas pump, there's some guy that signs, it officially pumps the gas, at the right, all that. That's who he was. His name's there on every gas pump in that area because he's the ag commissioner for years. But he was telling me about it. He says the almond growers, they took the root system up about a little bit above the ground of the tree that grew quickly as a very young tree. So they grow these little trees, and they take this root system and they cut it off and they graft onto it the top of one of these that had the good nuts and the high yield, and they plant them. So they grow quickly and they'd have high yield, good tasting nuts. And that's what all the orchards, just thousands and thousands of trees were all around this area, almond trees. And so sounds good. Sounds like it works well. They grow quickly, and that's what they want because they don't have time. Time is money. But out in California, it would rain a lot. It's dry a lot of the years, but when it rained, sometimes it would rain a lot. I remember one time we were there, it rained for, I think, 40 or 43, 45 days in a row. And it didn't rain a lot, but it rained all the time, every day, day without end. I loved it. I thought it was great. Everybody else was like hating it. And it just rained and rained and rained and rained, just kind of a drizzle, sometimes a harder rain. But the ground got totally saturated. So there's no place for the water to go. Roads were flooding, not because there was water coming in. It was just, there was no place for it to go. It wouldn't go into the ground. And so the ground got incredibly saturated. And a little bit after, sometime during the end of this, we had a really big storm come through, a lot of wind. And afterwards, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of almond trees because the root system was very shallow, and they weren't stable. And they just devastated the almond fields. And they couldn't really just set them right up and plant them again. It wouldn't work like that. So they had to take them all out. There was a big sale on firewood, and all that. So it was really hard on them. But that's kind of what we're like when we don't walk with the Lord, when we refuse to walk with the Lord, when we refuse to listen to his instruction, when we won't confess and forsake our sin, when we just will not. I'm not talking about the occasional sin. We sin all the time. But when we sin, it's like, oh, I did that again, God, I'm so sorry, and we're back in fellowship, and we get back with him. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But when we go for a season, and we just fight it, and we fight it, and we fight it, and we harden ourselves to sin, and all the other words that are in there, and we just will not. What happens is we lose our root system. We lose our root system, okay? And we're open to any storm that comes by. We have no strength anymore. We look good. It looks okay on the outside. Those trees looked great, but you could literally just kind of almost push them over at the end of that with all that water, because the ground was so wet. It just bloop, and it was gone. And they looked good on the outside, but they weren't good. Okay, and so that's what happens to us. Anything is going to knock us over, and knock us down, and knock us out. And the other thing that happens is without deep roots, what happens if the opposite goes on? What happens if the rain doesn't come? What happens during a drought? Well, a tree that has deep roots can go down to the groundwater, to the water table that is down. And out there, it's down a ways, 20, 30 feet. Okay, we put in wells for our church out there. Our drinking water well was 50 feet. Our fire well was 150 feet. And that's where there were two different water tables. But 50 feet, and a big tree will put down roots that far. And so in a drought, when everything's drying up, the tree with the deep roots, it's still green. It's still the first tree we talked about. His leaf also shall not wither, right? But when we don't have those deep roots, there's no water for it to pick up. And the leaves are all going to wither up and fall off. And if it goes on too long, the branches are going to die, wither up and fall off. It's going to become dried out. A little fire would take all of it. Okay, that's what we're going to be like. If we won't put our roots down in the Lord, and tap into that water that He has. It talks about or like the chaff which the wind driveth away. I don't know how much y'all know about wheat and growing wheat. Not today, but back then. They didn't have any kind of machinery or anything else, so they grow wheat. Wheat would grow about, about 3 foot tall, anywhere from 2 to 3 foot tall, nice healthy stalk. And the wheat are the seed pods on the end of the little stem that comes up. And there's little leaves and stuff, but the seeds form, that is the grains of wheat. And so when harvest time came, they'd get out there and they'd cut it all down, and somebody gather it up, and they'd put it here, and they'd tie it around, and they'd have a sheave that would sit there, and they'd sit all around the field, the sheaves of wheat stalks. And they'd let them sit there for a while and dry out. And then they'd take them, and they put them on a hard surface, and they get big sticks, and they beat them and beat them and beat them and beat them. And what would happen is that would loosen the grains of wheat. And then they'd pick up the stalk and shake it, and they'd beat it again and shake it. And pretty soon, when the wheat was all off, they'd take the stalks out, and they'd burn them, get rid of them. Now, on the ground, they have all these tiny pieces of chaff, the stalk that got beat, and it's all dried out, and the grains of wheat. And so they'd get like a big blanket, and somebody on each corner, and they'd sweep all this up, and they'd put it in the blanket. And when a breeze was blowing, not a high wind, but a breeze, they take the four corners of the blanket and they shake it up into the air, and the wheat and the chaff would go up, and the wind would blow the chaff away because it's very light, and then the wheat would come down, and they'd keep doing that until it was just wheat. And then they take and put it in a jar, and they get some more, they put it in a jar, and they take it out to grind it to turn it into flour. If we're not careful, if we allow ourselves, if we will walk away from the Lord, if we do that long enough, that picture there is the chaff. And we're gone. We're just gone. Now, I'm not saying we're going to die. I'm not saying we're going to go to hell. But our life is just a wreck. Because there's nothing there. We're like the chaff which the wind blows away. Okay? And I don't want to be like the chaff. I'd much rather be the wheat that God can take and grind me and make me into something that can feed people and help people to grow. I'm not sure about the getting ground up part, but you know what? That's when we go through the fire and we get formed like the potter. If you want to go to the clay, that's also an uncomfortable process. But that's to help others. But we're supposed to be the wheat, not the chaff. But it says right here, it says right there that the ungodly, the ones that will not walk with God, are like the chaff, which the wind just, and it's gone. Don't want to be like that. We've got to stay rooted. We've got to stay with God. We've got to walk with Him. And when we fall, we've got to get up and go again. We have to, that keeps our roots alive. It keeps our branches alive. It keeps our leaves green. It makes us useful to God. Otherwise, it's just, and we've got nothing. When we start depending on ourselves, it looks good until it's just gone. Okay, and then where do we turn to? We can always turn back to God. But the further we are from God, the more consequences we have accrued to our account. And the more we're going to have to deal with. Now, God will take us right back and restore the relationship. But we're still going to live with all that baggage we picked up along the way until God slowly sorts it all out. But there's some of it that we're just going to live with for the rest of our life. So the message is, let's stay with the Lord. Yes, we mess up. Okay, let's cut that short, get right back with Him as soon as we can, and move on. Is that you guys get what I'm saying here? Let's do that first stuff. Don't walk, don't sit, don't stand. And then we will be the tree planted by the rivers of water. But if we do walk, we do stand, and we do sit, then we're like the chaff. Then we're like the chaff. And that's not who I want to be. That's not what I want to be. That's not much fun. All right? Quinn, you want to cut that off here? Let's go through our